opportunity to talk a little bit about my experience. Hopefully, is the right screen sharing? It's the presentation mode. You can see it. Okay, I was
Yes.
expecting a little window here. Okay, so as Patty already mentioned, my name is Dave Whalen. I work for a small defense contracting organization called CRG, stands for Cornerstone Research Group. They do lots of research and development for the Department of Defense and some of the other departments within the federal government. I've been working with CRG for about 5 years now. In the last 2 of those years, I've been serving as the IT director. Now, I wear lots of hats as the IT director, but since this seminar is focused on database administration, I'll be trying to narrow in on those aspects of my position. Let me try to get going here. There we go. Okay, so when I joined CRG, they had a need to streamline the process of data consolidation. There are some really talented engineers that work on staff there, and they created these really elaborate Excel files throughout the network that had all sorts of fancy algorithms, great graphs, um, did some really, really neat stuff, but it was dispersed throughout all the network. So if they wanted to consolidate everything and get a single look at things, that was a very manual process. So not only did that take a lot of time to actually do, but then anytime you're doing a manual process, we're human, right? We make mistakes. So you introduce that risk of human error. So what I proposed when I came on board was to consolidate all of this and to build out a database-centric application where there's a database at the core end of it, and then we build user interfaces on the outside so that people can access the information that they need to. So how do we go about doing that? First, I had to standardize a lot of the data structure. One of the nice things, the great things about Excel is that it's really flexible and you can make it do just about anything you want to. But one of the bad things about Excel is that it's really flexible and you can make it do just about anything you want it to, right? So while you get great flexibility, it kind of makes standardization a nightmare. So I had to spend a bunch of time standardizing the data and get it into a place where I could centralize that. Once we made a little bit of progress on that, we actually built out the database environment. I tend to stick with Microsoft products. So we used a product called Microsoft SQL Server. Then we built our database and took all of that data that was living in Excel and we imported it into the database environment. Now, most people, if you give them access to the database as raw, they don't know what to do with it, right? So we had to build out a user interface. Since so many of them like Excel, I kept some of it in Excel, kept the data in the database itself, but then let them view it through Excel. But most of our application, you can access your information using a web application. So what does a typical day look like for doing database administration type things? Well, because we built our own application, we have to make sure that it's always working. I can't call up a number, right, when something's broken to say, hey, can you fix this, right? That's me. I have to be the one that is there ready to fix these sorts of things. And that has several different areas of it. For one thing, we got to make sure that all the different database objects are functioning as they should. And there's different types of objects. Some of them build reports and give you information so that you can, know the things that you need to know. Others are forms, where you're updating a record, maybe an employee record, maybe a project that you're working on. And then sometimes you work with other applications. And so you need to sync your system with those applications. So there's all kinds of different objects and they all have to be working right in order for everything to flow smoothly. It's nice when they do, but let's be honest, a lot of times something goes wrong, right? Something gets corrupted, something's missing, somebody put in bad data, somebody on the third application changes your requirements. Just today, I had to spend quite a bit of time this morning. We have a time card system that we use, and so I sync our system with that, and something went wrong with one of those records. So I had to figure out where that was and fix that so that way the syncing process could continue. I get a lot of requests for new reports. Um, People need to have different reports to get their jobs done. So people come to me and say, "Hey, it'd be great if I had a report that showed X, Y, and Z." So we build those out for people. And then we also had to manage access to data, and that kind of takes two faces. On the one side, we need to make sure that people who need access to that information can get to it when they need to. But if it's sensitive information, we need to make sure that people who aren't authorized to see that data cannot get access to it. So that's kind of a typical day. Um, I'm the type of person who enjoys working on problems all by myself, and I get to do that quite a bit. But there's also a lot of time where I need to collaborate with other people. And so there's kind of this balance of I work alone sometimes, but then I work in groups sometimes also. And I found it works or it follows the project life cycle typically. So when you get a new project set up, there's typically a lot of collaboration that happens. Do we understand the problem? What kinds of constraints do we have? What are they expecting when we finish a product? We need to make sure that everyone's on the same page about the work that's going to be done. But then we need to actually go and build the product out itself. So that work is done either all by yourself, maybe with one or two other people, but a lot of that's done all by yourself. And then once you hit a milestone or once you're ready for them to review it, well, then there's more collaboration that you have to do. Um, to make sure, did we achieve what they were expecting? Are there any new findings that you need to address? That type of thing. So it kind of follows a cycle. One of the many things that the pandemic changed is where do I spend most of my time? Now, pre-pandemic, I was always at the office, either in a meeting room or sitting at my desk. But since the pandemic hit, I actually now predominantly work from home. Um, Depending on the task at hand, I might change my work venue a little bit. If it's a phone call and it's a nice afternoon, like it is out there right now, I might take that while I'm walking around the block. Do I need to brainstorm with somebody? Well, I might meet them at a coffee shop. And every now and then I actually have to run into an office. So it really depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. But most of the time, I need to make sure that I have access to the internet. All of our data is stored on the network, so I got to access that or on the web. So you got to have good access to the internet. How efficient do I need to be? If I'm comparing different applications, it's really nice to have my dual monitors and my extended keyboard with the little number pad. Um, but if I'm just responding to email, I don't need as many efficiency tools. And then am I trying to deep dive focus, or am I trying to get the creative juices flowing to solve problems that I haven't thought about? All of that kind of goes into where do I find myself on a day-to-day basis. Now, most new hires are probably going to start off working pretty standard business hours. By standard, I mean, you clock in sometime in the morning, sometime in the early afternoon or early evening is when you can leave. But as your experience increases, one of the realities is that the database is at the center of our system. So it has to be working all the time. Sometimes it goes down unexpectedly. And so you got to work extra hours to make it start working again. And then other times you have to push updates, and you don't want to do that when everybody else is on the system. So you have to do that during the non-normal hours. Most of the time, though, it balances out. A lot of companies offer flex time. So if you have to work late one night, you can come in late that morning or the next morning. My favorite, because I work a lot of hours between 6 and 7 to push the changes to the network, I like to take a break, go play some disc golf maybe, and then come back after hours and work until the task is done. So it just depends. Everyone follows, their own unique career path, but mine personally started off by attending Wright State right out of school. I started off in mechanical engineering, made it about three quarters and realized, nope, that's not for me. So I switched over to mathematics and found that I really enjoy statistics. So I got my undergraduate degree in statistics. And then my senior year of college, I started working as a junior modeling and simulation analyst. If you're not familiar with modeling and simulation analysis, you use computer simulations to create scenarios. And then you take the data that comes out of those simulations and you got to make sense out of it, right? Raw data is mostly meaningless. So you got to look for trends, look for meaningful information of it. So I spent a lot of time dealing with a lot of data. Along the way, my company, who was really small at the time, needed a way to track how much time we were spending on different projects. We didn't really have anything in place. One other person had set something up, but it wasn't quite meeting our needs. So I said, I'll give it a try. So I started by researching what is PHP and what is MySQL, because that's the environment that she had developed it in. And I just built it out from there. So I learned databases from the school of hard knocks. A lot of mistakes, figured out what works, many iterations later, and then finally it started to become into more of a stable application. As it got more stable and as more people started using it, while I had worked many years as just kind of a one-person department, my company was gracious enough to give staff and to help me get the work done. So now I lead a team that develops the software that maintains the database for this application. And then as IT director, that happened about 2 years ago, where they consolidated the IT functions, more like typical IT functions like help desk. I got locked out of my computer. Can you help me install this application? That type of thing. They rolled that underneath my department. So now I oversee both of those aspects. All right, there we go. So, what kind of training should a student focus on if they are interested in DBA? If you're not familiar with DBA, that's database administrator, right? You can take more of the traditional route if you want to go to college or university, and there's a lot of options out there for that. Basically, anything in computer science or information technology, computer engineering, information systems. There are some institutions that offer specifically database administration degrees. But basically, if you focus on anything in the computer science or technology areas, you'll be on a good trajectory to landing a job as a DBA. Now, if you want to take a more focused path, you can do that, but you have to keep in mind that there's kind of three different main platforms that that a lot of organizations go down. Microsoft has their suite. It's called SQL Server. And then there's Oracle database. And then IBM built one that is called DB2. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm a Microsoft guy, so I really have stuck mostly with just SQL Server, but there's a lot of legacy systems and a lot of other systems that use Oracle and DB2. There is a lot of crossover between the systems. So if you know Microsoft SQL, you won't be totally lost if you go over to Oracle. There are some crossovers, but there's also a lot of differences depending on or for those different environments. The programming language that you got to learn is called Structured Query Language. It's abbreviated SQL, but you might also hear someone refer to it as SQL. All of those stand for the same thing, and that's pretty standard across all, no matter what database system that you have, Microsoft, Oracle, or DB2. But there are some differences between them. So if you learn it in Microsoft, in the environment, you'll know a lot of the basics in the others, but some of the finer details and the more complicated things, those take on a very different flavor depending on which path you're using. Now, there's lots of certifications that you could also do, but depending or which route you want to take really depends on, did you go to Microsoft, Oracle, or DB2? And then what do you want to do? There's straight database administration. Then there's more of the analytics and the business intelligence areas. And so there's a lot of different areas that you could get certified in. So really you need to tailor that based on what's your interest level, what environment do you think that you're going to find yourself in, and what are you trying to accomplish. If you do a Google search on the web, there's a lot of different resources out there available that you can use to figure out, like, how do I get trained for this, and then where do I go to actually get the training. Now, in my opinion, and this is just one guy talking here, after you achieve the basics of database knowledge, what's really the most valuable skill is creative problem solving. Most of the problems that I solve, most isn't maybe fair. Many of the problems that I solve are not repeatable, right? So I solve a problem today, I get a new problem tomorrow. Probably I'm not going to take the same steps to solving that. And part of that's the just, you know, a byproduct of the fact that we're dealing with live data. It's always changing. People enter new data. If you're using a third party application, they might change something on you. So it's not very repeatable. So you have to learn the skill of creative problem solving to figure out, first, what's going on? What is this problem? Where did it come from? The problem actually might exist in a different place than where it's manifested. So you got to dig in 2, 3, 4 levels deep until you figure out what that problem is. And then once you figure out what the problem is, you need to figure out, all right, well, how are we going to go about fixing it? And not just fixing it for today, but then trying to make sure that this type of problem doesn't happen again in the future. It's called defensive programming, right? You might have heard it in some of the other talks. How do we make sure that problems like this, we've accounted for lots of different scenarios so that this type of thing doesn't happen again? And this is a little bit hard to get from school. This is something that maybe they have classes now. They didn't when I was in school anyway. This is something that you'll need to practice in real life on the job, making sure that you make incremental problems in this skill set. So what kind of advice would I give to potential DBAs? First, get acclimated and get comfortable with relational databases. There are some databases that are not relational, especially for a lot of smaller applications and newer platforms. But relational databases are used in most legacy systems. I would say most, not all. So get comfortable with it, get acclimated, start using it. There's a free database called AdventureWorks out online that you can download, and it's got like example data and a bunch of different objects that you can explore with. So become comfortable with what does a database look like? How do I use it? How do I get information out of it? Then I would advise to build your own. Think about something that you care about and that you're willing to spend the time to go through the learning curve of doing things wrong, scrapping it, starting over. So pick something that you care about, but try it yourself. Start from scratch. Um, Most of the time in the real world, you probably won't start from scratch like I did. But starting from scratch is going to help you to get a lot of the fundamentals that you need that will help you solve problems as you experience them. And then there are certain personality types that I would say are more um, conducive towards the life of a DBA. I mentioned earlier, I like to work all by myself. I'm also a very detail oriented person. I love structure. I love making order out of chaos, taking raw gobs and gobs of data and putting it into a little chart that says, okay, here's your answer. I find that very satisfying. And you'll get a lot of that doing the work of a DBA. But if you're the type of person that doesn't really like details, gets kind of nauseated when you have to figure out and keep track of a whole bunch of things, you might find the life of a DBA to be a little bit frustrating. I also mentioned earlier, you need to be able to balance working alone versus collaborating with others. And a lot of times you can kind of tailor it. If you like to work alone, maybe you can do that. If you like to work in groups, maybe you can do more of that. But there's going to be both of it involved in most DBA jobs. All right, here. So just a couple final thoughts that I wanted to put down before I can try to address any questions that you guys have. My path probably looks different than a lot of DBAs or standard DBAs. I consider myself very blessed to have been able to create something from the ground up and to be given the opportunity to do that. Many people won't. Many people will be supporting something that exists, and there's a lot of satisfaction and a lot of good things there too. So I point this out just to say that there's a lot of different facets to being DBA. You can get really into the networks and the configuration, or you can focus more on the data side and the report side. There's lots of different things that you can do as a database. And in a lot of places, there's a lot of opportunities. You find what you like, you can forge your own path. I was blessed with working for an organization that, I put forth a vision for them. They liked it and they let me do it. And I've been able to, carve out an exciting career path. So you put in the effort. The world of databases, it offers a lot of opportunities for people to forge their own path. Okay. I went through that pretty briefly. I was afraid of talking too much. It's about 3:23. Patty, do we have time for questions?
We definitely do. One quick one is
Yeah.
the free website. Is it ventureworks.com?
So yeah, that's a great question. It's not a website per se. It's a free database,
Okay.
and it's called Adventure Works. One word,
Okay.
Adventure Works, merge it together. So if you just Google that, there's a lot of environments. You're actually going to have to do quite a bit to install the configuration on your system and then load that database. So it's not like just go to a website, click a link, and you're good to go. There's a bit of work to do, but Adventure Works is what it's called.
All right. Thank you. And then what is the one skill you think is the most important that a student should have who wants to go into database administration?
Well, I mentioned the creative problem solving. I really think that that is the most important. Um, I would say understanding SQL. I mean, you really got to. So that's a little bit less tangible. More tangible is you really got to be familiar with using the language itself, SQL, structured query language, or SQL. You really got to have a good foundation in using SQL before you can really get started. So learn the basics of SQL, and then learn how to solve problems creatively.
Thank you. And another question is, since you're an IT director, when you're hiring an individual, what is the skill, the trait that you are actually most looking for, the quality in an individual?
Yeah, I think ingenuity is the skill set that I would pick. It goes along closely with creative problem solving. There are a lot of resources out on the web, so that I don't focus so much on what language does somebody know, or what environment are they used to, because you can learn that on the job and pretty quickly. There's so many great resources out there. So to me, being able to adapt and to focus on how do we solve the problem at hand, that is what I really find the most valuable, and that I try to make sure that people that join my team know. That's what I expect out of people. Can you be flexible and turn on a dime and solve the problems that you've probably never solved before?
Thank you. That's great advice. And then I have one other question, and it's actually a little bit different. You initially were talking about Excel. So most of the students here are probably learning Google, because a lot of schools offer Google,
Hmm.
which is for the students is very similar to Microsoft Excel. If you know Google Sheets, you'll be able to figure
Google
out
Sheets.
Excel. Um,
Hmm.
but when you're working with Excel, what is the one advanced skill in Excel would you recommend somebody taking time to learn? Is it pivot tables? Is it calculations? Because that is something that is used every day in the work environment, no matter
Yeah.
what your program, what job you have, you're probably going to have some type of Excel spreadsheet in your life.
Yeah, so pivot tables is one that a lot of times people advise. Personally, I'm not a huge fan. Sorry, Bill Gates, for all the
Mhm.
effort you put into that. It's nice when you don't quite know what you're looking for, but if you know what you're looking for, I find it to be pretty cumbersome. So the skill set that I would say that you can learn that'll set you apart, macros. I don't know if Google Sheets has macros or not, but if you're building some sort of Excel interface with the database, you got to be able to call that database in the system, and you can use the GUIs that they provide for you. But if you know how to run macros, like more advanced macros too, that's going to really help you to solve a lot of problems using Excel. And if people aren't familiar, macros, you use, that's another language called Visual Basic Application, VBA, and it works kind of behind the scenes of Excel. And it's pretty old at this point, honestly, but it's still pretty powerful, especially if you're talking back and forth with databases. So there's a lot of good stuff that you can do. Let's see, we got a comment here. Oh my. Okay, so someone's saying that you can use JavaScript to call from Google Script. So maybe JavaScript is, I haven't used Google Sheets all that much. I mean, a little bit, but not advanced. So it sounds like JavaScript gives you some options to do the macros, the equivalent of macros.
Yeah, it's great chat, great sharing of knowledge, everyone on the chat. So thank you. Well, Dave, I will let you go. Thank you for all your information and letting us pick your brain for a little bit. We definitely appreciate it, and we appreciate your time today. And with that, I will let you go. And I will introduce our next speaker of the day. And Harley Neff is from Wright Pat Airport or Wright Pat Credit Union, and he's going to speak to us a little bit about network engineering.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. All right, so let me just get this here. I know you said we could share screen, so I went ahead and got us a little slide.
Great, thank you.